So if you have a plug that might look something like this one is recessed in the wall, it's loose, you might have something like that going on. Maybe somebody came along and added a tile backsplash. Maybe they added some shiplap to the house sometime along the way. You don't know what happened. All you know is you got a bad plug here. I'm going to show you 2 practical ways on how to fix this coming up right now. All right, so as you can see, I've taken the receptacle cover off. Now, if you notice here, the front edge of the box is probably somewhere flush with the stud, which means it's about a 1/2 inch recess behind the drywall. And I'll explain why that's bad here in just a minute. Now, if you also notice, somebody has gone and cut the drywall out too big, and now when you attempt to tighten the plug, it just sinks in the wall, right? So that's why you have your sunken outlet, and here's why it's loose. Now, normally the ears of the plug will actually sit on top of the drywall, but even if they did that in this scenario, this would still be out of code. So you might be tempted to say, well, I can just remove the plug and use some spacers that are like this that you can get pretty much, local hardware store, Amazon, whatever. And these things are pretty cool. They fold up, and you can get away with 2, maybe 3 folds at the most, I would say. I don't even know if I would go 3. And then just put these, they tear off, they just tear off, and then you get your sections, right? So you might be tempted just to use the spacer right behind the plug, like so. You get what I mean. I probably needed 3 spacers there because it's still sunken in a little bit. But even if this worked, this is not the right way to fix this. The way the code reads, here it is right here, 314.20. Now this is a non-combustible surface. This is the gypsum drywall. It says that front edge of the box can't be recessed any more than 1/4 inch below the surface right here. So if I use the spacers and fix the plug, it's still recessed too far behind the wall. Now, one other note that I want to make before we move on is if this was a wood wall, like somebody put paneling or shiplap or something like that is a combustible surface, if you look back at that code that I put up a minute ago, it says that combustible surfaces, the outlet box has to be flush with the wall. It can't be recessed at all, not 1/4 inch, not anything. It has to be flush. So instead of using the spacers like I showed you a minute ago, what you need to do is get an outlet extender box just like this one, or similar to this one. You can get these at your hardware store, Amazon, or wherever. And this is like a sleeve that goes inside the box, and that will cover up these sides and solve the problem. So just slip it over the plug. And of course, you'll want to do this with the power turned off. That should be obvious, but I'll mention it anyway. They are a little bit tight fit. So they fit like that. But we still have the problem of the drywall cut too big. So these ears are just going to fall behind the drywall. So you'll want to use these in combination with those spacers I showed you. So right there, just like so. I've got that doubled up right there. And then the screws that come with the box are a little bit longer than the ones that come with the plug. So make sure to use those screws. Much better. And that's like it's supposed to be. Just fine right there. Now this will work for most applications. If you need the spacers, use them. But there's another way that you can fix this, and that's by just replacing the whole box in the wall. All right, so as you can see, I've gone ahead and removed the outlet and the sleeve and all that stuff, and now we need to remove this box out of the wall so we can fix that. Sometimes if you have a crimp like this can be pretty difficult to remove. One option is you can cut it right here and then add a pigtail to it with a wire nut. I don't really want to do that if we don't have to, so I'm going to try to remove the crimp. I have found that if you take 2 pairs of pliers and kind of go at it like this and kind of just bend it back and forth, you can crack that thing. There we go. That one didn't want to crack. but I just kind of worked it back and forth and squeezed it to try to make it round again and all that good stuff. So just straighten out the end right there and it'll pull off. There we go. Now we can undo our grounds and we didn't damage any wires. And it does help to straighten out the loops on the other wires if you got loops there. All right, everything's straight. One thing that I like to do is take a screwdriver and slip it between the stud and the box. Kind of give it a little pry. Do the same for the top nail. Careful not to damage the drywall. Now, because this one is behind the drywall, we can actually pry it out of there. Turn it to the side. Now we can pull the nails out. Like so. And just tilt it back like so. And work those wires out of there. Now, one other tip for removing the box is sometimes you just can't get them to turn or whatever. You can use an oscillating tool if you have one to cut the box up into pieces so you can get it out of the wall. Just have to be careful not to damage any of the wires. You can also use that cutting tool to cut the nails on the box if you need to, or a loose hacksaw blade you can get in there and hack up and down, and that'll cut the nails too, and that'll relieve some pressure. So, I mean, the way that I did this was fairly easy. It's not always that easy. So those are a couple of tips if you run into that. So the replacement box I like to use is this Southwire Smart Box right here. This works really well. It's got 2 screws that screw right into the wall. They come out right here. So go ahead and knock out your clamps that are in the appropriate area where your box is at and feed your wires through. Now the beauty of this kind of box is you just kind of put it where you want it and use these screws right here, and they'll go right into the stud. So we're going to make that flush. Now some people like to replace those Phillips screws with some Torx-headed screws, but I find the Phillips ones work just fine. All right, that's it. I got the screws tight. We're a little bit below the drywall, but no more than 1/8 here. Remember, the code allows up to 1/4, so we're fine right there. From here, you just go ahead and wire your plug up the way that you normally would wire it up. If you don't know how to wire up a plug, I've got a video right here I'll link in the description so that you can go ahead and look at that and see how to wire up your plug back again. All right, so I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching.